as we all know, our dear friend Mr. Wang Yi visited India today. He came to Delhi and he met the Indian foreign minister. He also met India's national security advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval. This is a photograph of Mr. Wang Yi with our foreign minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. And they had discussions and all that. And so lots of people. So this is what happened today, all right? And the thing is, lots of people in the comments ask me about, is there a possibility of some kind of alliance between India and China, considering the rapid geopolitical realignment that we are witnessing in the world today after the events of February 24, which is the beginning of the Ukraine war. Right. So lots of people are speculating, they're wondering whether India and China are going to have a rapprochement and maybe align together, maybe a triumvirate of India, China, Russia, something like that. Right. So that's what lots of people are wondering right now. And if you look at China, see, if you look at the Chinese media before the Ukraine conflict, it was very stridently anti-India. Right. So you saw all kinds of vicious articles belittling India and warning India and threatening India and that sort of thing. The general tone and tenor of the Chinese media was like that, very much anti-India. But in the very beginning, since mid February, we are seeing a very different approach in the Chinese media. And let me give some examples of that. So this is the Global Times. So this tweet is from February 22. It says China has never been a threat to India in the Indian Ocean. China shares greater room for cooperation than divergence with India in the maritime domain as the two countries with the largest population in the world. Very nice, conciliatory, reasonable thing to say, right? Let's look at this. This is from March 7th. This is the Global Times. It says China and India should be partners for mutual success, not adversaries of mutual attrition. And this is what the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Wang Yi, has said. He said that the two countries should not allow territorial disputes left over from history to affect the overall interests of bilateral cooperation. So this is from March 7th. This is from March 15th. Again, the Global Times. It says, don't make a fuss over India's legitimate oil trade with Russia. So it says that India's oil trade with Russia is legitimate and the Americans are being unfair and the West is being unfair in criticizing India over it. So they are taking India's side in this entire matter. How interesting is that? This is from March 16. So this is again the Global Times. It says American elites clamor to sanction India as they are not used to the world saying no to US. So once again, they are taking India's side. It's about the Indian purchase of Russian crude oil. This is from March 22. It says Biden's criticism of India's neutrality on Russia exposes US hypocrisy. So they are using this as a way of criticizing the Americans, because Biden recently said something about India, that India is a very shaky partner or something like that. And once again, this is something else, but it says Chinese. This is from March 25, which is today. Global Times tweet again. The Chinese people praise India's decisive measures to contain the coronavirus, saying China and India can step up the cooperation in information sharing and vaccine development to jointly fight COVID 19. So, as you can see, the entire tone and tenor of the Chinese press has changed drastically. It's a very significant change. They have never been this nice when addressing India, right? So their entire approach has changed after mid February. And mid February is where you had the the beginning of the Russian intervention in Ukraine, right? So it looks like they are making a certain kind of signal. Maybe they want some kind of better relationship with India, right? So that's words. So that's what they're saying. Now, Mr. Wang Yi came to India today, and it's interesting that just before he came to India, he made these remarks in an OIC conference, Organization of Islamic Countries. And in his remarks, he spoke about Kashmir. And I don't know exactly what the words were, but it looks like he spoke about the Kashmir issue and treated Kashmir like a disputed territory and all that. So if you look at that, that is an anti India statement, isn't it? So all of this signaling that the Chinese media is doing, Mr. Wang Yi, just before he came to India, he reversed that by needling India and making a provocative statement. And the Chinese strategy or policy has always been to provoke India before every important visit. For instance, after Mr. Narendra Modi became Prime Minister in 2014, Mr. Xi Jinping came to India for the first time. And just before Mr. Xi Jinping reached India, there was a massive Chinese incursion in the Chumar sector in East Ladakh. More than thousand Chinese soldiers transgressed into Indian territory. And this is a pattern you see over and over again. Whenever there is some big meeting or some important interaction between India and China at a high level, there is some Chinese provocation at the border or of some other kind. Right? So the Chinese, they always seek to remind India of its apparently inferior position and inferior strength compared to China. So that's what the Chinese policy has been. And despite all this wonderful signaling from the Chinese media, just before Mr. Wang Yi came to India today, he made a provocative statement, which essentially is interference in India's internal affairs. So it tells you something. It tells you that China's playbook has not changed. Their approach has not really changed. They're just signaling a certain kind of thing, but their actual approach is the same. And now let's understand the geopolitical situation vis-a-vis China and India. So India, as we know, has been to a significant extent dependent on Russia for military hardware, for spares, for various Sukhoi aircraft and various other systems we may have purchased from them. Russia is still India's major arms supplier. So India is to a significant extent dependent on Russia on this front. Now, after the Ukraine intervention and the incredibly brutal sanctions that the US has imposed on Russia, Russia is significantly dependent on China now. So India is dependent on Russia. Russia is dependent on China. What does it mean? It means that China now has greater leverage over India. And that is possibly what Mr. Wang Yi was trying to drive home by making this provocative statement about Kashmir. And I'm not sure what was discussed in the meeting. Maybe we'll find out about that. But the thing is, China now has greater leverage over India. China seeks good relations possibly with India, but it seeks those good relations on Chinese terms, not on India's terms. It doesn't want to seek a good relationship on equal terms. China has an economy that is 5 times greater than that of India. So the relationship is not a relationship between equals, it's an unequal relationship. So if there is any agreement, it's going to be an unequal agreement. If there's going to be any relationship, it's going to be an unequal relationship. So the Chinese seek good relations perhaps, but on their terms, not on our terms or not on equal fair terms. It's not about fairness. The Chinese seek unequal relations with India. Please understand that. The Chinese do not see India as their equal, and rightfully so. India is not China's equal. They are far greater than us today. And more importantly, the Chinese may seek good relations with India, but they seek a weak, pliable, meek, and docile India, which is not what they have today. Because we have a very strong government and a very strong leader at the helm of India's government. Mr. Modi is a strong leader, very strong leader. That's what they don't like. They would rather prefer to have a weak, docile, submissive prime minister, a weak coalition government, that sort of thing. Which is why 2024 is very, very important for India and also for the Chinese. And paradoxically, also for the Americans, because they also don't want a strong government in India. So that's the interesting situation that we are in right now. Now let's take a look at what the Chinese what the interaction with the Chinese was like. Let's take a look at a little bit of that. So this is what we hear. So this tweet came out in the afternoon today. So our foreign minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that our relationship with China at present is not normal, given the presence of a large number of troops in contravention of the 1993-96 agreements. That's what Dr. Jaishankar said after his meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And he further said that so long there are very large deployments, the border situation is not normal. We still have ongoing friction areas, having made progress in resolving some friction areas, including Pangong. So our discussion today was how to take this forward, and he also made it clear that the relationship is not normal because of the provocations that the Chinese have done, because of the Chinese actions, not because of Indian actions. The Indian side has not transgressed into what the Chinese perceive to be their territory in Chinese occupied Tibet. It is the Chinese that have been making regular incursions on Indian territory. So if the relationship is not normal, it's because of Chinese actions. If the relationship is bad, it's because of Chinese actions. And if the Chinese truly seek to have a good relationship with India, then why are they insisting on not resolving the border issue? The border issue can be negotiated and finalized. It can happen. There have been, I don't know, 15, 19, 300 rounds of border negotiations, border talks, and nothing ever happens. There is no progress ever. So the Chinese are repeatedly stalling the border negotiations with India because they want to keep the border issue open so that they can keep pressurizing India and keeping India on the back foot. So given all of this, there is no possibility right now of any alliance or any compromise between India and China. The Chinese are playing the same game that they've been playing for decades. Their stance has not changed. Words don't matter, actions matter. The words of their media are meaningless if the actions on the ground are the same. Please understand this, my friends. Indians love words. Indians are obsessed with words. Oh, he said this or he said that. She said this, she said that. Who cares what somebody says? Look at the actions. The actions are what determines the future, not words. So please understand that the situation is not as nice as you think it is. There is no possibility right now in the near future or even the medium term future, of any improvement of relations between India and China. As long as the Chinese keep doing these provocations on the border, as long as they keep claiming Indian territory as their own, and as long as the border issue is open, which they are preventing from being closed, so as long as this situation continues, India and China will not have good relations. And the thing is this: when you have two major powers that share a common border, it's almost impossible to have good relations. The only way in which India and China can have good relations in the long term is if they don't have a common shared border, which means for that to happen, Tibet has to be independent, it has to be free. Only then can India have good relations, which is what we had for 2000 years between India and China, ever since China came into existence. Let's be nice to them and say 3000 years, right? So for 3000 years, India and China had excellent relations because we never had a common shared border. But after the 1950s, when they took over Tibet, they annexed Tibet. That's when they had a common border with us, and that's where all this that's the root cause of all the problems, all the friction between India and China. So as things stand, there is no possibility in the near term future or medium term future of an improvement of relations between India and China. If we want to have peace with China, it can only be through strength. If India is sufficiently strong, the Chinese will think 15 times before they try to start something. So it is peace through strength. India has to ensure that it is strong enough to deter China. And we have one very good deterrent, of course, which is nuclear weapons.